Hello and welcome to the Varietal Show. My name is Rory, and if you've never been here before, well, welcome to Varietal Literature's YouTube channel, a channel all about sort of narrative. And what we do on Tuesdays, which is not tonight, is we do a bunch of folktale and fairy tale readings, which I greatly enjoy. But tonight, what we do is we play pretty much, we try to create a first draft of a story or a scene or a vignette or an idea for a character, whatever else. We do writing. And the way that we do that is we use sort of game structures. And what we've been doing for the last 10 to 15 streams is we've been going through a big package of solo tabletop RPGs that I gotten off of itch.io. And we sort of use that as a jumping off point to create a story. So if that interests you, if you want to write along with me, do your own version, you can put that in the live chat if you're here live, and I'll probably actually read it aloud unless you don't want me to. Or you can put it in the comments down below if you're not watching this live. I'm excited to read anyone's sort of creativity that are inspired by our activities here. But beyond that, if you are just here to sort of hear the stories, hear the results, get right to the writing, you don't care about the rules or whatever else, down in the description below, if you're not watching this live, obviously, there will be timestamps, and you can click on those and jump to where you need to go, or where you want to go, rather. None of this is necessary. It's all delightfully superfluous. GS says magically shifting sounds a bit unsettling. Yeah, when I read through the game, the feeling that I got, which I'll talk about a bit more later, was a kind of Twin Peaks kind of quality to it, where you're not really sure if you're in a dream or not. All right, that's the gist of it, which means that we need to get to the specifics. All right. Since the topic here is sort of hometowns, do you, out there in internet land, do you miss your hometown, or were you happy to leave it? Okay, so this part of the show is called Lit Games. Lit Games stands for literature games. Or cool games, I guess. But no, it really stands for literature games. It is lyric games, expressive games, solo tabletop RPGs, some kind of game structure on prompts. In the case of tonight, and this is the very short version of it, you draw a card, and based on the card you draw, you will get a prompt. And then you sort of write something that makes that prompt make sense in your character's story as they travel through this fictional city. That is the simplest version of it. Solo tabletop RPGs are not typically very mechanically intense. They're more about creativity. So, yeah. But I'm going to go into a little more detail on it, but that's the short version. So, with that said, GS says I missed it. I'm not sure what you mean by I missed it. Missed what? Hair. Needed another brush before I started today. Anyways, it's neither here nor there. We're playing a game called A Visit to San Sibilia, which is bills itself as a solo journaling game, and indeed that's what we're going to structure it around. I do tend to not like writing in first person too much, so I'm on the fence of whether I'll do this in first person or as a third person story. But yeah, we'll see. So, to play this game, if you want to play at home, if you are not watching live, there will be a pinned comment with a link to the game. I think it's like $5. To play this game, you need something to write on, which we're going to use Google Docs, which you'll be able to see. And you need a standard deck of cards with the jokers removed. And you can get what's called a D6, which is just for most people a regular dice, and roll it. But all this really does, by the way, is tell you how many days it's been since your last journal entry. So I don't know if you even mechanically feel the need to do that. I don't know that I'm going to use that today, because I don't think it really inspires me one way or another. The cards relate to, and I'll show you it now because this is the core of the game. The cards relate to different word prompts. So for example, there's an adjective table here when we get into our entry where we will have to draw a card. And then if it will first ask whether it's a red suit or a black suit. So whether it's jacks and clubs or whether it's diamonds and hearts. And in the case of diamonds and hearts, that means you would take from the left side of the table. In the case of jacks and clubs, you'd be picking from the right side of the table. And the way you pick which specific row is based on whether you drew an ace, or in this case a 9. So I drew a 9 of diamonds here. That's a red suit 9. The adjective we would get is much needed. Now, what does that mean? Well, it doesn't mean anything right now. I'm just giving you the structure of the game. As you can see, there's multiple charts like this. I'm not going to go through them all because as we play the game and as we write, these things will reveal themselves. But you can see that there isn't a location and event table here. And again, that gives us, we draw 2 cards, and that gives us things to write about, if you will. Okay. It gives a sample journal entry, but I don't think I really need to read it. But if you really want to, it's in the book for you. So the first thing we have to do is create our character. And I have made some decisions about the character already, and I will let you know because I have a little blurb to start us off. But first and foremost, we need to generate our character from our character table. And the way we do that is we draw 2 cards. And this table doesn't actually care about what color the cards are. You just pick from one side and then the other. So I am going to try to make this obvious that it's random. Draw that card, and let's draw that card. Okay. Now it's going to be up to us how we want to place these, but the cards we drew were 7 and 6. Again, on this chart, the colors don't matter. But a 7 on the left side can be forgetful. So our character could be forgetful. Or if we want to swap the order on these, a 6 on this side is blasphemous. So, I mean, that's up to chat. If in live chat you want to make a recommendation, you feel strongly that this character needs to be blasphemous or forgetful or whatever. I'm going to say forgetful for now, but that can change. And then on the other side here, because we need to assign one of the other cards, we can choose to assign the 7 or the 6 to the merchant or the cartographer. And if you don't know what a cartographer is, they're a map maker. This game does seem to presume it's a little bit old-timey, just based on its decorative elements. So, we can be a merchant or a cartographer. So if we are a merchant, then we are a blasphemous merchant. And if we're a cartographer, we're a forgetful cartographer, which is hilarious. So actually, I take it back. Chat doesn't get to decide. A forgetful cartographer is definitely not going to work. Very well. So that's our character's trait and job. So I'm calling this, Is It Home If It's Never the Same? I give these episodes little titles. A forgetful cartographer, and as per usual, chat, I am outsourcing names and genders. Let me know what you want your character to be, and if you don't, I will randomize it. GS, are you gonna tell me what you missed? I still haven't heard. Okay, well, we sort of decide on the gender and name of our character that we're going to be playing as we explore this strange city. I'm going to read you some things. I'm going to read you actually the introduction to this game's town. I do appreciate the specifics here. Oh, your hometown. I forgot the question. Okay. I forgot my own question. So I'm going to read the little blurb that the material as written gives us. San Sibilia. This city never changes. This city never stays the same. Very poetic. Close to the coast in a river delta, San Sibilia's sprawling districts are connected by rambling trams, ramshackle ferries, and in its center lies Saint Rioja. Or maybe it's Riosha. A district full of churches and temples, artists and dilettantes. Are you an artist or a dilettante, chat? In the open-air cafes of La Bohemine. Across the river is Bislo, where the factory workers live among narrow streets and leaning houses. So you can see it's a little old-timey. You may have seen San Sibilia on a map a long time ago when you were browsing the atlas in your mother's study, but when you checked the book later, that city had disappeared. Or you may have read about it once in a 20-part encyclopedia in a dusty shop around the corner, but haven't been able to find the bookstore since. Oh, GS says I have to look up dilettante. It's like, you know, like old-timey way of saying good for nothing little street punk, right? Like not like a street punk, like a person who is like lazy and artistic, like a layabout who doesn't really do much. But like if you ever go to Starbucks and there's like 10,000 people on iPads or MacBooks or whatever else, and they're all telling you about how one day they're going to finish their script, that's probably a dilettante. Okay. A lazy artist is the way I understand it anyways. So that's San Sibilia as the book, as the game understands it. So let me read you the little blurb that I've put out ahead of time to kind of frame our character a bit, and we'll get to writing. I have these memories of playing in streets that do not exist. My mother said they were in a place called San Sibilia, a town where I was born. Yet no map I see tells of it. When I asked where it was, she would only smile. My home is for me a dream that no one knew. Today, though, I was driving through the countryside along a crumbling road between the tall grasses of an abandoned farm when I saw an old sign faded by the sun that said San Sibilia Ferry. Well, I am aboard it now, alone but for a man that silently sweeps the deck. Through the fog on the river, I can see a city coming into view. So, in my conception, my man grew up here, has memories of here, but nobody else seems to know it exists. Gia says, that's frustrating when you know you saw something but can never find it again. Oh, yeah. I hate to be the old man, but if you are a person who lived in a time before internet browsers were quite refined and had a bunch of RAM to play with, you would look up things. You'd be like, that's neat. And then you'd go and look them up again to show them to somebody because you didn't really have a phone or anything to show them. Like, you couldn't bring it up. You just have to try and search it on their computer in their house. And you just couldn't find it. Jess says she likes fairies. I do too. I like the water. Okay, so that means now that I have my little intro, we have our first journal of arriving into the city. Chat is live. If you want to give ideas, they are welcome. I will incorporate any ideas, or try to incorporate most ideas that I get, I should say. I'm usually pretty good with it, but sometimes I just can't. Which means we need to go to the adjective table. So we title our entry day whatever number of our visit. This is going to be day 1. We draw 2 cards. I wish there was not a leg, because then I could be like, chat, what card do you want to draw? We draw 2 cards. So I haven't looked at them, but I've kept their order. We consult the adjective table for the first card drawn and the location or event table for the second. Combining the result adjective and the resulting location or event to inspire your next journal entry. Once you've completed your entry, place both cards on the bottom after your deck. So my first card that I drew was this, which is an 8 of diamonds. So on the adjective table, 8 of diamonds, that's a red suit, is illuminating. Let's copy and paste that into our document. Our next card is the 2 of clubs. The 2 of clubs, black suit. See how it says red suit and black suit on the top of this table? And then it has numbers down the left side. This is a black suit, rendezvous with new friends. Now here's the thing, I'm going to change that because the way I've conceptualized this story, there would be no new friends yet. So I'm actually going to draw again, which is permitted by the rules, and also, who cares if it isn't? One thing I always find weird about these, I mean, only if you read a lot of these would you even notice, but one thing I find weird about these solo tabletop RPGs is they always tell you that you can ignore certain rules. And like, I feel like nobody needs to hear that. It's a solo tabletop RPG. It's just you, right? Like, there's no balance to be concerned with. This is a 4 of hearts. That's a gallery opening. Okay. What kind of gallery? Chat? Is it sculptures? Is it paintings? Is it something else entirely? Is it a gallery of old artifacts? What kind of gallery are we going to be visiting when we step off our ferry in what was supposedly our hometown? Illuminating gallery opening? Is that it? There we go. Illuminating gallery opening. Gonna take a drink of water. And then we'll get to what happens when we get off the ferry. GS says steampunk gallery, old weird devices. I love that idea. I mean, obviously it won't call itself steampunk, but we'll say that it's a city, you know, kind of in that frame. I think that's about right for the story. And it can be an exploration, like you can go in and see devices he's never seen before. With steampunk, everything is steam powered. That's the point of it. So the question is, chat, what kind of old devices, or new devices but old to us, would he be fascinated to see in this gallery? And I will write a bit of text to get him off the ferry and towards a gallery, and then we can work on that gallery trip together. Illuminating means you could do light stuff, or you could take it more metaphorically and it would be like illuminating, like wisdom. Okay. The ferry scraped its belly on the ramp, and I swung open the door to my old sedan. The fellow who was sweeping startled me with his graveled voice, with his worn voice. Next to my ear. As he said, "No cars here, Governor. Gov." I beg your pardon? I asked with a bit startled. No cause in the city. He repeated with no interest in explaining his this odd rule. He creased his weathered brow and sucked at his flaky, chapped lips. Oh, GS is going deep. It says, well, he's a map maker, so some drafting arm thing or engineering scope to map outside. It's called a theodolite? Theodolite. Theodolite? Theodolite. Triangulates a point using trigonometry. I don't have many rules on this. But no math. No, I'm kidding. That sounds like a great idea. We got to figure out a way to like make that a little more steampunky and weird, but for sure we'll put that in. And sucked at his flaky chapped lips. What am I to do with my car then? I asked. We will abide by it. So the old man slowly turned and began to sweep about that same pile of dust. There are some wild... I used to do a lot of work in construction, and there are some wild devices for surveying. Yeah, Jess is talking about surveying equipment. There's a device, I forget the name of it, but it's this laser... I mean, this isn't true surveying stuff. This is like leveling topsoil and stuff for parking lots or whatnot. There's a device that shoots a laser out evenly in all directions, and then you walk around with a stick. And that stick tells you how far or above or below you are that laser, this invisible laser ceiling. It's a cool little trick. And then they mark it with marker paint and flatten it out. Pile of dust. Pile of dust. What if I refuse? I called. What if I just go back? The old man smiled, a knowing smile that sent a chill down my spine. He huffed a laugh and said, "You're not going back. You're home." Feeling the whole conversation felt like a page from a haunted ghost, a haunted story. Story of... Oh, I wish I could think of a name of a Victorian author right now. Page from... Well, Arthur Conan Doyle did that kind of stuff. Arthur Conan Doyle's Strange Tales. So I opted to pursue it no further. GS said they looked up a theodolite and it is very steampunk. Okay. Well, now I gotta look it up too. Oh, I see. Oh, I didn't know that's what that was called. Okay. I mean, the old school ones are very sort of steampunky, but the modern ones are yeah, surveyor's equipment that I'm familiar with. Oh, that's tiny. Thanks a lot, Google. Well, there you go. It's the best picture I have, but it's tiny, so it's probably useless to people. Okay. Felt like a page from Arthur, so I opted to pursue it no further. I shoved my rolls of map into the trunk. Sorry, I shoved my work that had filled the back seat. Rolls of new maps, rather. I was constructing for the county. Into the trunk of my old Austin. And locked it. It was quite a bit of work to lose. Even though I couldn't imagine why someone may steal an incomplete map. I climbed off the ferry by a wood and iron causeway, and entered streets that were as familiar to me as they were bizarre. All right, now I gotta do some heavy lifting on explaining this city, and then we get the action. This is the thing about writing. Here's Rory's writing moment. Well, water breaks and writing tips with Rory. Dun, dun, dun. Most of writing is what I call setting the stage. It's a term I came up with personally. You may have never heard it before. That's a joke. It's a cliche at this point. But setting the stage, quite literally, in this sense, is where people are, what's in the room or the city or wherever they are. Just sort of setting up the pieces of the stage, if you will. So that people have some sort of material understanding of the events that are going to unfold. And so, like, most of writing is all this, like, setup that feels slow to do and is not always the most fun thing, although writers often do like description. Once you've set your pieces on the board, so for example, I set up the ferry, set up the fact that there's an old man sweeping and whatever else, then it culminates in them discussing stuff. Now, you can move that around, but sooner or later, you're going to have to set the stage for anybody to have a sense of what's going on. So, unfortunately, the city is the star here, so we need to take some time to describe this city. So, what I am going to ask, chat, is when you think of a city like this sort of vaguely Victorian London setting of an imaginary city, I mean, it's a Spanish name, but the pictures that we had seen of it that were, or at least supposedly it, let me see if I can find the example here, they're kind of older 20s 30s steampunky kind of thing, old cobblestone. What kind of What kind of details do you think we should include, or do you see in your imagination when you think of this city of old leaning buildings and factories and whatever else? GS says, what time of day is this, or did I miss this? You didn't miss it. I haven't decided a time of day. I did say we were driving along the road. It didn't seem like they were doing a recreational thing. A cartographer is probably working, so we can assume it's sort of morning or dusk is our outer limits, but whatever time you think is appropriate. But yeah, I mean, tell me things that you see in your imagination as you walk through the city, and I'll try to include them. Because that's what most art is presenting little novelties. The narrow streets were filled with the clatter of wooden-soled shoes. Marching over cobblestone. There was a smell in the air of wildflowers and kerosene. Pungent and acidic in turn. Yeah, so street lights, if not broad daylight. So I imagine they would be street lamps, right? Or maybe they're making that shift. I'm going with lamps. That could explain some of the kerosene smell. Horses and some early horseless carriages. Yeah, I think horses are the ones. I apologized to distracted folk of all types as I pushed against the stream of bodies that that were flooding the streets. I don't know how I feel about this sentence. Susie the Bear Girl, let me know if I pronounced that wrong, said, I think passing a newsboy trying to sell an extra issue would be a neat scene. I like that idea. Of course it would work. What do you think, keeping in mind that we're going for this like Twin Peaks dream quality, what do you think should be in the newspaper? And if you don't have an idea, I do have an idea, but I'll open up to the crowd. I also see that GS like immediately after said shouting of newspaper boys selling their papers. Okay. I pushed against the stream of bodies that were flooding the streets. Apologize to the distracted folks of all types as I pushed against the stream of bodies that were flooding the streets. Something about that sentence I don't like, but I'm not going to dwell on it because it's a first draft. Big thing about first drafts, write it like it's burning behind you so you don't do a bunch of correction on sentences that you'd probably not use in the end. I wriggled past lace and wool until the breathless heat of the summer evening. I do like the pretentious eve, but let's say maybe in an update to an ongoing missing persons case. Oh, that's a good idea. I have an idea. I Don't know that it makes any sense, but we'll see where it goes if we even get to anything about it before we run out of time. I wriggled past lace and wool, each damp with sweat. Maybe I need to put a little bit more in there. Sleeves of lace and wool, each damp with sweat, until the breathless heat of the summer evening began to suffocate me. Panic gripped me, and I shoved into an alley out of the flow, out of the procession of citizens. Susie says, also, I love that I stumbled across the stream. Super cool. Well, thank you, Susie. I'm glad that you stumbled across this stream. Panic gripped me and I shoved into an alley out of the procession of citizens. Panic gripped me and I shoved into an alley out of the procession of citizens. I leaned against the wall, drawing in a deep breath. Counting to 4. Then releasing it. I was finding some calm in the bewildering city of San Sibilia. When a crass but nasal voice cut in and screeched. My temptation is to go to like sarcastically London, like a 1950s cartoon version of London. Like, how about it, Gav? But I don't think I'm going to do that. Screeched. Only 5 piece for the news, fresh off the press. Hear about the latest missing folk in San Sibilia. I gasped in a newfound panic and just shook my head. But the child persisted and waved the paper at my nose, proclaiming, "Well now, sir, can't you smell the ink? The paper's still right warm." We're getting sarcastically London again. GS says pence. Yeah, so I considered saying pence. I am aware that that is the right term, but I don't know if I want to put it that clearly in a specific nation. Would Gerald be classed as a scientist or an academic? I don't know. What do you guys think a cartographer lands? It seems more applied to me. For what it's worth, cartographers, I mean, a lot of them did like county line stuff, but mountaineering was originally skills you needed to be a cartographer of a certain type. So like the border, I live in Canada, so the border of Canada was defined by people basically mountaineering from coast to coast and trying to draw a straight line. And that process is where a lot of alpine climbing and stuff gets its skill sets from. It used to be the trade of a cartographer. Although cartographers have multiple forms. That's more surveyors, I guess. Cartographers are really people who take that information and turn it into a map. So it depends on what you want to go with, right? If you want to make him more of a surveyor, then he'd be more of an academic. If you want to go with something more adventurous, I don't know if that fits him though, he would be more of like a surveyor. I may have said that twice, I don't know. Well now, sir, can't you smell the ink? The paper is still right warm. I shook my head and looked down at the paper. In bold black letters, Susie says, I'd say an academic type, multifaceted in his work. Ooh, I like that. If you missed it, Susie, which I think you probably did, the gist of it is that this was a town he has memories of that his mom says was San Sibilia. But when he... this is a mixture of stuff that you get from the Solo Tabletop RPG. This is the cover of it. Come on. There we go. There. It's called A Visit to San Sibilia, a solo journaling game from itch.io. Well, it's not from that, but that's where you can get it. But I had said that he has these memories of a city that is not on any maps. And so that's part of why we sort of randomly got that he was a cartographer, but it worked quite well. So I like the idea of him being a bit academic and kind of like low-key traumatized by this fact that his mother said he grew up in a town and he has memories of a town, but no map tracks it. Because it's got, like, again, this kind of Twin Peaks quality. I shook my head and looked down at the paper. In bold black letters, it said, missing map maker. And below it, in a sketch of middling quality, was an approximation of my own face. I snatched. Why is that in quotes? GS says this is a great story. Yeah. I don't think we're gonna finish it though, unfortunately. People are welcome to keep building on it though. Was an approximation of my own face. I snatched the paper from the paper boy's hands. And shouted at the young lad, much unfairly, but I was feverish with confusion. Such a Victorian thing to say. Who is this? The lad reiterated, 5 pieces, sir. And you can learn all there is to learn. I pulled a bill of $5 from my pocket. And handed it to the boy. GS says, yes, people must get the vapors in Victorian times. I pulled a bill of $5 from my pocket and handed it to the boy, who only looked at it with confusion. He looked up and reiterated 5 pieces. Sir. Yes, but this is all I have. Keep the change. I waved the dollars. I waved the paper before him. Paper's confusing because we've already called paper newspaper. I waved the bill before him. This is all I have. Keep the change. I waved the bill before him. He shook his head. Said, I'm not sure what that is, sir. Don't know why he's southern now, but whatever. People don't come here for my accents. What is well, you guys sort of watch me fuss around and get us to the gallery, which I'm gonna have to do soon. I am curious. Every town kind of has like a story, like, well, not every town, but a lot of them do, where it's like when you go there and you meet someone from that town, or you're not from out of town and you go there, it's the it's Susie has said a funny thing. You also have to be ladling gin down your throat at all times in Victorian London. You don't need to be just in Victorian London. Gin is delicious in all eras. Except for that one era of bathtub gin that made you go blind. Although it might be tasty, I suspect it wasn't. I forgot what I was saying. I remember. When you go there, you're like, oh yeah, this city, blah, blah, blah. I'll give you an example. The city I grew up in had this park that had these really sort of strangely rounded hills. It was a kid's park, not very big. And I may be misremembering it, but to my memory, the story goes that that was a buried sewage plant of some sort. It had something to do with sewage. Or it was a garbage dump they'd like bowled a turf over. All I remember is that at some point in my life, wondering about these weird, specifically rounded hills, and then somebody was like, the story of this is that you're playing on buried garbage. There's like, sometimes it's more interesting. It's like, this is the town where such and such grew up. But I'm curious if your hometowns had like the story that everyone told to new people to the town. He shook his head and said, I'm not sure what that is, sir. Susie says, gin and tonic is a favorite of mine. Also, what kind of landscape does this town reside in? It's a good question. We sort of established narrow roads, and it was along a river. We came in on a ferry. The name sounds either New Orleans-ish or Spanish. GS says, love gin, but with 3 O's. We're a bunch of old ladies sipping gin here. He shook his head and said, I'm not sure what this is, sir. Yeah. Shook his head and said, I'm not sure what this is, sir. Give me the paper. It's money. The boy shrunk into the crowd. Fearfully. I grabbed the shoulder of a passing man of seemingly upright disposition. That's such a classic like Victorian thing. Here, he spun. Come on. They're all about like dispositions in Victorian writing. He spun towards me and bumbled as I spilled his glass of gin across his waistcoat. He sneered at me. Sneered is a word I use too much in my writing, but and said, "What is the meaning of this? Where is the newspaper printed? Where is the offices? Where is the newspaper printed? Anything else is redundant." I shouted over the crowd. He pointed south in the direction that all were moving. And I slipped into the stream of wriggling pedestrians. They say my good man a lot. Yeah, good point. My good man. Where is the newspaper printed? And I slipped into the stream of wriggling pedestrians. It wasn't long. GS says this is a mystery that needs many chapters. Yeah, see that's the thing. I do feel a little bad that I do often get to finish stories because we do it for about an hour. But I feel a little bad that we have somebody new and I'm not gonna get a gratifying ending. But I think that might be the case because there's so many facets to this that I wouldn't be able to do it. But I do want us to get at least to the prompt, so I guess we'll go a little long. So I slipped into the stream of wriggling pedestrians. As I shifted over cobblestone and slipped between shoulders, I tried to ask these folks where they were headed, but they all just smiled the way my mum used to when I would ask about this city. When I finally broke out of the flow of seemingly endless people, I was at the door of the local Tribune. Susie says, nah, it's totally fine. As a writer, I know it takes time, especially for a mystery. For sure, yeah. What kind of stuff do you write, Susie? I was at the doors of the local Tribune. I walked inside, and there was an eerie silence. The glass was thick on the window to the street. So thick, it distorted the passing people into watercolor streaks. that slipped from frame, from pane to pane, I guess. From pane to pane. The streets hubbub was fully dampened. A lot of fantasy. I've also dabbled into horror, romance, and sci-fi. For no reason I understand, I've, as of late, been interested in horror elements, at least in stories. What kind of fantasy? Like high fantasy, cheerful fantasy, miserable, gritty, Game of Thrones fantasy? Is it like a lot of politics and people hooking up, or is it like a lot of wandering and seeing beautiful things? Because obviously these two things can't live together. The streets, the hubbub of the streets. I don't know what I'm doing here. A night guard looked up from a paper he was reading. Looked up from the newspaper with my face on the front. But he seemed neither surprised that I was here, nor particularly aware that I was on the paper. Before I could speak, he pointed towards a door and said, "The gallery's that way." Good sir. You look the type to enjoy it. Have a good time. GS says, oh good, you'll have great ideas, Susie. I'm not a writer, so not too many great ideas. Now, I don't agree with that. I don't think being a writer is having great ideas. Being a writer is knowing what to do with ideas. I think everybody has great ideas, which was a lot of the reason why I started this stream. I just think people don't always know what to do with those ideas. Susie says, high fantasy with larger-than-life plots of the gods that rule the world. Ooh. Eventually it becomes low fantasy mixed with sci-fi, and then the gods fall and the world turns to ash. I had a concept that I sort of half wrote, and then I kind of ditched, of that you just reminded me of it. It was a pirate ship. It sort of did the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie thing, where like they were cursed to be aboard the ship, and they could not leave it. But the premise was, if that's true, then obviously they lived through like World War II and all the way into the future until basically the ocean was gone, right? And I wrote a bunch of it, and it's one of those things that sounds better on paper, and then it just didn't make a very compelling narrative. But originally my concept was it would go to sort of the heat death of the universe. Long past the point where people populated the earth. The gallery's that way, good sir. You look the type to enjoy it. Have a good time. He was gray. He was of gray pallor and leaned back into his chair with a groan. like most people I had met in San Sibilia, it felt like they were familiar and yet alien. I didn't want to push my luck. I wanted to find the journalist that had claimed me missing. Susie says, I have 3 novels planned for that world, all set in different times. I think that'll be fun. I think that's a neat place to go, because, like, oh my god, here it goes. The art nerd in me is going to come out here, but I do think that high fantasy was written at a time, because I really like sort of folklore and that high-minded, head-hopping style of writing. Obviously, I have a folklore show on Tuesdays where I read folklore aloud, called Fireside Fairy Tales. But anyways, I like that style, and obviously a lot of fantasy was informed by that sort of not too introspective, plot-centric kind of style. So, the thing is, though, for those who don't know, is over the last, 100 years, we kind of went modernist, which was like a lot of perspective writing, and then you start getting into postmodernism, which is a lot of like you can only know yourself, and it's extremely introspective to the extent that most traditional things like plot and structure and stuff are all malleable around this sort of individual's journey and thoughts. And you see a lot of that coming from Gen X through the 90s there. The thing is I think that there is something very interesting about highly introspective works, but I also feel like a story should be a story. And one of the things that keeps me going back to those old styles is that they still have a lot of structure. They still have a lot of like world building, and they still have an idea. Like it's not just a person staring out a window finding themselves, which was a fine tradition, but that story's been told as many ways as it could possibly be told. But I do think it's interesting to take sort of our emotional and psychological insights of our generation and blend it with those more structured high fantasy folklore kind of structures. And I think a part of that is sort of playing more around with the timeline and making it less locked in to a medieval time frame. So I am particularly interested in the idea of a fantasy world that stretches across multiple generations. I wanted to find the journalist that had claimed me missing. Instead, though, I wandered into a brightly lit and wide galleria of brass of brass bones, of inventions that hissed with pressured steam, and twitched. This is a terrible sentence. Brass. Wandered into a brightly lit galleria. Strange appendages of brass, each was a spider's web of old clock gears whizzing skeletal metal pinchers about set automated tasks, hissing now and then. Susie says, yeah, I love using my fantasy world to explore myself and the world around me. Honestly, I've discovered a lot through my characters, like reconciling my relationship with my sexuality and gender. Yay! Congratulations on that. I hope you're happier now. Also, sorry if I'm blabbering away. No, that is the exact point. This is a cafe of writing. Blab away. The whizzing skeletal metal pinchers about set automated tasks, hissing now and then with pressurized steam. I also feel the same way, by the way. When I write a story, I try not to overthink it in the first draft, but when I read it back, I always feel like it's my subconscious talking to me, right? And so I get things from my own stories that I don't think anybody else is going to ever get. Like, there's layers. There's the story I tell the world, and then there's the story that my brain was telling myself. Like, one thing I noticed when I was looking at a lot of my high school stories is they were just so angry. Not that they were like violent stories or anything like that. I didn't really write that style. I always kind of wrote like a literary style, but it just struck me that everyone was like pissed off in all my stories. I think that's just because high school is a time to be angry at nothing. Hissing now and then with pressurized steam put a scare in me which I could not shake. I passed 2 sets of clicking fingers that squeezed a liquor of dark tea from a tea bag and placed a steaming cup upon a counter. Briefly, before pouring it into a sink and starting the boil again. I found myself woven into this world so quick. It was a kind of intoxication, a fascination that washed away, if only for a moment, the mysteries of the day. A tea machine, yeah. The most important thing about the tea machine is it pours the tea out when you've forgotten it and it went cold. I forgot to mention, just to chat in general, that today I finally watched Akira. It took me forever to find a way to watch that movie. If you don't know Akira, it's an incredibly famous anime. I'm not a big anime person. I don't have anything against it, really. and there's some I've enjoyed, but for the most part, it's not my scene. But that is considered like one of the greatest animated films ever made, and I got to agree, it's pretty damn good. Anyways, the I watched it today, and the best way I can describe it is if somebody watched footage of like Hiroshima's bombs on acid and then made a cyberpunk story out of it. But it is an absolutely beautiful movie, and I found it a compelling, if not utterly bewildering plot. But I was interested to the very end. If only for a moment the mysteries of the day. My eye. Susie says, oh my god, Akira is so good. I watched it so many times for high school research paper on the cultural impact of the film in the West. Oh, do catch me up. I'm way behind on it. I bought art for it. Like, I have this art behind here from the same artist. Unfortunately, it sits this way, so I'll never have it in the back of the stream. But I bought this art for it, this beautiful art for it. And I'm aware of the Kira slide and all of this. An absolutely beautiful movie. GS says, I guess I need to watch this. Good luck finding it. The way that I was able to watch it is I got a trial subscription to Crunchyroll, which only has anime, and that is the only place I could find it that was original language with the subtitles, because I don't particularly like dubs. That was the only way I could find it was to just get a 2-week thing, watch it, and then cancel on my Crunchyroll subscription. I don't know where else you can find it. You can buy it, but then there's a bunch of debate about whether that's a good version to buy or not. It's a whole thing. For such a groundbreaking film, it's incredibly hard to find. My eye was caught by the Theo... What the hell was it called? The Theo Delight... The Theo... I found it. Oh, Felix is here. Hello, Felix. Says it's always confused me that Akira is not the protagonist's name. You know, that's a fair enough point. If people don't know, Felix has been on this show before. Felix is a writer friend of mine who is currently in Hong Kong. What time is it there? Akira is a big part of the anime boom in the 90s, and is the reason anime is huge in the West nowadays. I could see so much 90s anime in that. Like, there was so much Dragon Ball Z, and there was so much Evangelion in its plot. Like, there was so much there. My eye was caught by the theodolite. A strange contraption, only really known to cartographers such as me. Felix says, hi, it is almost 11 a.m. Well, it is almost 8 p.m. here. 8 p.m. is my hard stop because I gotta go feed my cat. So but I think I have at least like the hook that I would close the first chapter of what is a fairly complicated story, and then we'll read back what we did, and we'll call it a day. My eye was caught by the theodolite, a strange contraption really only known as cartographers such as me. It consisted of a lens beset in bright bronze that projected a focused light from a lantern from a strange lantern. Small and cool it was. I had never seen anything like it. It moved itself upon its tripod, and scanned its odd light about the room. I watched it for too long and failed to notice that a figure had wandered into the room and was watching. When I broke my fixation on the device, I turned and yelped. To see a thin, bug-eyed man staring at me. Who are you? Who just stares at a man in a gallery? I said, trying to regain my decency. Jess says, does he have a monocle? He does now. The crouched man pulled a thin chain from his pocket that swung with a fine gold rimmed monocle and pressed it into his waxy flesh. His gelatinous eye flittered. Yeah, I didn't think that was right. There we go. Flittered around in magnification. I don't know if that makes sense. Everyone's jumping on the eyewear. His gelatinous eye flittered around in magnification. In disproportion. Here we go. This is how we'll do it. Disproportion from his face, from the magnification of his thick lens. After a moment, he spread that same strange and knowing smile, then said, "Oh, so the map maker has come home." And we'll end it there. Okay. Which means we need to go back and read what we came up with. And drink some water. If you were coming to this part of the stream, it is because you just want to hear the story. So just a reminder of what we were doing. We were playing a solo tabletop RPG that you can get from itch.io called Visit to San Sibilia, a solo journaling game. The gist of the game is that you are wandering around a city that is ever-changing. Its relationship is undefined, but in our game it was our hometown. You draw cards from a deck. Depending on what you find, you get prompts. So the prompt that we got for our character was it's a forgetful cartographer. The forgetful thing I don't think we ever did too much with, but the cartographer we did. We also drew some prompts for an illuminated galleria, or gallery showing, and you'll see that near the end. I have these memories of playing in streets that do not exist. My mother said they were in San Sibilia, the town where I was born, yet no map tells of it. When I asked her where it was, she would only smile. My home is a dream that no one seems to know. Today, though, I was driving through the countryside along a crumbling road between the tall grasses of an abandoned farm when I saw an old sign faded by the sun that said San Sibilia Ferry. I am aboard that ferry now, and I am alone but for a man that silently sweeps on the deck. Through the fog on the river, I can see a city coming into view. The ferry scraped its belly on the ramp, and I swung open the door to my old sedan. The fellow who was sweeping startled me with his worn voice next to my ear as he said, "No cars here, Gov." "I beg your pardon," I asked, a bit startled. "No cars in the city," he repeated with no interest in explaining this odd rule. That much was clear. He creased his weathered brow and sucked at his flaky, chapped lips. "What am I to do with my car, then?" I asked. "We will abide by it," said the old man, who slowly turned and began to sweep about the same pile of dust. "And what if I refuse?" I called. "What if I just go back?" The old man smiled a knowing smile that sent a chill down my spine. He huffed a laugh and said, "You're not going back. You're home." The whole conversation felt like a page from Arthur Conan Doyle's Strange Tales, so I opted to pursue it no further. I shoved my work that had filled the back seat, rolls of new maps I was constructing for the county, into the trunk of my old Austin and locked it. It was quite a bit of work to lose, even though I couldn't imagine why someone may steal an incomplete map. So I secured it anyways. I then climbed off the ferry by a wooden iron causeway that entered streets that were as familiar to me as they were bizarre. The narrow streets were filled with the clatter of wooden-soled shoes marching over cobblestone. There was a smell in the air of wildflowers and kerosene, pungent and acidic in turn. I apologized to distracted folks of all types as I pushed against their stream of bodies that were flooding the streets. I wriggled past sleeves of lace and wool, each damp with sweat, until the breathless heat of the summer evening began to suffocate me. Panic gripped me, and I shoved into an alley out of the procession of citizens. I leaned against the wall, drawing in a deep breath, counting to 4, then releasing it. I was finding some calm in the bewildering city of San Sibilia when a crass but nasal voice cut in and screeched, "Only 5 piece for the news, fresh off the press. Hear about the latest missing folk in San Sibilia?" I gasped in a newfound panic and just shook my head. But the child persisted and waved the paper at my nose, proclaiming, "Well now, sir, you can smell the ink. The paper is still right warm, fresh as fresh can be." I shook my head and looked down at the paper. Then I saw it. In bold black letters it said, "Missing Map Maker." And below it, in a sketch of middling quality, was an approximation of my own face. I snatched the paper from the paper boy's hands and shouted at the young lad, much unfairly, but I was feverish with confusion. "Who is this?" The lad reiterated, 5 pieces, sir, and you can learn all there is to learn. I pulled a bill of $5 from my pocket and handed it to the boy, who only looked at it with confusion. He looked up and reiterated, 5 pieces, sir. Yes, but this is all I have. Keep the change. I waved the bill before him. He shook his head and said, I'm not sure what this is, sir. Give me the paper. It's money. I shouted. The boy shrunk into the crowd fearfully. I grabbed the shoulder of a passing man of seemingly upright disposition. He spun towards me and bumbled as I spilled his glass of gin across his waistcoat. He sneered and said, What is the meaning of this? My good man, where's the newspaper printed? I shouted over the crowd, moving ever onward into the street. He pointed south in the direction that all were moving, and I slipped into the stream of wriggling pedestrians. As I shifted over the cobblestone and slipped between shoulders, I tried to ask these folks where they were headed, but they all just smiled, the way my mom used to when I would ask about this city. When I finally broke out of the flow of seemingly endless people, I was at the doors of the local Tribune. I walked inside, and there was an eerie silence. The glass was so thick on the window to the street, so thick it distorted the passing people into a watercolor streaks that slipped from pane to pane. The hubbub of the streets was fully dampened in there by those thick old windows. A night guard looked up from the newspaper with my face on the front, but he seemed neither surprised that I was here nor particularly aware that I was on the paper. Before I could speak, he pointed towards a door and said, The gallery's that way, good sir. You look the type to enjoy it. Have a good time. He was of gray pallor and leaned back into his chair with a groan. Like most people I'd met in San Sibilia, it felt like they were familiar and yet alien. I didn't want to push my luck, though, so instead I wanted to find the journalist that had claimed me missing. So I wandered into the brightly lit galleria of strange appendages of brass. Each was a spider's web of old clock gears, whizzing skeletal metal pinchers about set automated tasks, hissing now and then with pressurized steam that put a scare in me, which I could not shake. I passed 2 sets of clicking fingers that squeezed a liquor of dark tea from a tea bag and placed a steaming cup upon a counter briefly before pouring it into a sink and starting its boil again. I found myself woven into this world so quickly it was a kind of intoxication of fascination that washed away, if only for a moment, the mysteries of the day. My eye was caught most by the theodolite, a strange contraption only really known to cartographers such as me. It consisted of a lens beset in a bright bronze that projected a light from a strange lantern, small and cool it was. I'd never seen anything like it. It moved itself upon its tripod and scanned its odd light about the room. I watched it for too long and failed to notice that a figure had wandered into the room and was watching. When I broke my fixation on the device and turned, I yelped at seeing a thin, bug-eyed man staring at me. Who are you? Who just stares at a man in a galleria? I said, trying to regain my decency. The crouched-over man pulled a thin chain from his pocket that swung with a fine gold-rimmed monocle and pressed it into his waxy flesh. His gelatinous eye flittered around in disproportion from his face from the magnification of his thick lens. After a moment, he spread that same strange and knowing smile, then said, "Oh, so the map maker has come home." And that was what we came up with the game San Sibilia. It is summer. It is the time of year that streams and content creation is tough to do. So if you did enjoy this stream, please consider giving it a like. And if you enjoy the concept of this, please consider subscribing. If you want to see more of this, there is a whole playlist of the Varietal Show. And the last 20 are like this. So if this is something you enjoy, the Susie says, what if the paper is what brought, I think you mean Gerald, like him being in the paper somehow shifted reality to bring him to San Sibilia? I like that idea. You're welcome to run with it. These are ideas we came up with together. I don't do any like further writing of the stories on stream, so if people want to branch off in 10 other directions with it, go for it. Write your own version on the prompts if you want, and if you want to play this game yourself, of course, you can get it on itch.io for $5. I don't have any connection to these people who make these games. That's just me saying, hey. Anyways, thank you so much. It's great to see you here, Felix. It's been a long time since we've had you in the chat, and I miss you dearly, buddy. Also, thank you, GS. It's always lovely to have your company, and it's really great to meet you, Susie. I'm glad to have heard about your stories, and I hope that your books are fun to write, if nothing else. Susie says the story is great so far. Thank you very much. By the way, if people are interested in me just as a writer, not sort of the gimmicky stream stuff, varietal-literature.ca is my website. It's me and a bunch of writers from Vancouver, but it's at this point mostly me. And there's like 5 or 6 different stories of mine up there. Some are quite short. They're flash fiction, and some are multi-part. Also, there is playlists on this channel of those writers, sometimes me, sometimes other people. There's one of Felix, actually, reading our stories aloud. And that is... Oh, God, I should know my own channel. The hell is that called? This is ridiculously unprofessional, but I'm going to find the name. It is content and playlists. Live read. Hashtag live read. Author reads their story. And there's a few there that you can read, or you can hear if you don't want to read them yourself. Anyhow, I think the most recent one there was Avalon, who I also do the Big Van Book Club, which is a book club of Vancouver writers. Anyways, I've that's enough rambling from me. Susie says, I'll definitely have to play this game. Love solo RPGs, so I was happy to be here. I was happy to have you. We're here Thursdays at 6:30 p.m. Pacific, whatever time that is for you. And I'd be very happy to have you back whenever you find the time and the will. But for the rest of you, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Get out of my shop.